I found out about the sale from the mailman, not from my son, not from a lawyer, just a folded white envelope shoved through the rusted slot in my door, carrying the words that ended 40 years of peace. Final notice of transfer of ownership, Lakeview property. At first I thought it was a mistake, some kind of scam or clerical confusion. My name, my full name, was still printed at the top. But when I turned to the second page, I saw it, his signature. Mark Henderson, my son. My only child. The house he sold wasn't just a place. It was the one thing left that tethered me to my late husband, Peter. We built it plank by plank on the edge of Lake Barrow, back when Mark was barely tall enough to carry a hammer. Peter used to say, "This house will be our legacy, Helen. Someday, Mark will bring his children here." But Mark didn't bring children. He brought real estate agents. The document listed the sale date as 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks, while I was in the hospital recovering from pneumonia, tubes in my nose, breath shallow as a whisper. I had given him power of attorney only for emergencies, just in case something happened to me. I never imagined that he would become the emergency. I drove out there the same evening. The air over Lake Barrow smelled the way it always did in autumn, pine sap and cold water, but the house looked foreign. A big blue "sold" sign stabbed into the ground like a blade. The porch light was off, though it had never been off before. I used to leave it on so that Peter could find his way back, as silly as that sounds for a man who's been gone 15 years. A black SUV was parked in the driveway. The buyer's maybe, or worse. When I saw Mark step out of the driver's seat, my knees nearly gave. He didn't look surprised. If anything, he looked prepared. "Mom," he said, voice steady, lips curved in that polite, hollow smile people wear when they don't want to be confronted. "I was going to call you." "Call me?" My voice cracked. "You sold my house, Mark." He sighed, as though I were a child refusing to understand arithmetic. "You were in the hospital. The bills were piling up. The house needed maintenance. You don't even stay here anymore, Mom. It's wasting away." My fingers dug into the fabric of my coat. "That house is mine. Your father and I built it. He cut me off. Dad's gone and you're living off his pension. You can't even afford groceries without help. You've been depending on me, Mom." He said the next part softly, but it landed like a knife. "You're becoming a leech." For a moment, the lake itself went silent. No geese, no wind, not even the low hum of crickets. Just that word echoing in the air between us. Leech. I'd worked 40 years as a school teacher. Raised him through nights when we couldn't afford heating. Stitched his torn jeans, skipped dinners so he could eat. I'd sold my jewelry to put him through college. I didn't think I could still feel a pain that sharp. "I'm not taking another step into that house," I whispered. "Not until I know what you've done." He ran a hand through his hair, impatient now. "It's done. You'll get part of the money. I made sure of that." "Part?" He looked away. "After fees and the loan I took for your care, there's not much left." I felt my chest tighten. He'd used my name, my property, and even the power of attorney I'd given him, to borrow against it. "Mark, you had no right." "I had every right," he snapped. "You signed the documents, remember? When you were in the hospital, you said you trusted me, and I had. I'd trusted him because he was my son." He turned his back and started toward the porch. "You should go home, Mom. I'll wire you your share when the funds clear. Maybe you can find a nice little condo near town." "Mark," but he was already unlocking the door, walking into what used to be our family's heart. My breath caught when I saw the interior. Our furniture gone, walls stripped, only dust and echoes left behind. The sound of his shoes clicking against the wooden floorboards was the sound of finality. I stood there on the gravel path long after he disappeared inside, the wind tugging at my coat, the smell of the lake thick with memory. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the small kitchen of my rental home, surrounded by the flicker of a weak lamp and silence that felt heavier than any storm. My son had taken everything, my home, my memories, my trust. But more than that, he'd taken away the image I'd held of him all my life. In the morning, I went to the county records office. The clerk, a young woman with chipped blue nails, tapped at her keyboard and frowned. "Yes, Mrs. Henderson. The deed was transferred to a Mr. and Mrs. Coleman. Full payment confirmed." "But there's something odd." "Odd?" She turned the monitor toward me. There's a line here about a secondary transfer, temporary custodial holding in the name of Mark Henderson Enterprises, LLC. That's your son, right? I blinked. LLC? Yep. It's registered as a small development company. He sold the house to himself first, under that LLC, then flipped it to the Colemans 3 days later. I could barely breathe. That's fraud, I whispered. The clerk shrugged. Maybe, but since you gave him power of attorney, you'll need to prove intent. It's a gray area, intent. Oh, I knew his intent. Every fake smile, every word about taking care of things. It was all calculated. When I drove back through town, I noticed the way neighbors looked at me, half pity, half curiosity. The story had already spread. Poor Helen, they must have said. Her son took her house. She should have known better. But I wasn't ready to be pitied. I stopped by an old friend's office, Diane Wells, local attorney, widow like me. We used to teach at the same school before she switched careers. She took one look at the papers and exhaled slowly. Helen, this isn't just betrayal. It's premeditated. He planned this months ago. How do I stop him? I asked. First, you don't confront him again. You let me dig. There's always a trail with these things. Emails, transfers, fake invoices. If he used your power of attorney outside its intended limits, we can prove abuse. Her words steadied me a little. But later that evening, when I returned home, I found another envelope slid under my door. No stamp, just my name, written in his handwriting. Inside was a check, $5,000, and a note. Mom, please don't make this harder than it has to be. Take this money and let's both move on. You'll thank me later. That was when something inside me hardened. I'd spent my entire life keeping the peace, forgiving, making excuses. But this was different. This was theft disguised as care. I tore the check in half and dropped it into the trash. That night, I pulled out an old metal box from the closet. Inside were decades of letters, receipts, and photographs, everything that tied me to the house. Peter's original purchase documents, our mortgage payments, even the building permits we filed back in 1983. I lined them up across the table like soldiers. I wasn't just going to prove what he did. I was going to make him face it. 3 days later, Diane called. Helen, you were right. He's been running small real estate flips through that LLC for over a year. But this one's different. He used your name to secure a personal loan, $80,000. The house sale cleared the debt and he pocketed the profit. I pressed the phone against my ear until my knuckles went white. So he sold my home to cover his own mistakes? Yes, and if we act fast, we can file a restraining petition and freeze any remaining funds before they vanish. But we'll need proof that he acted outside the scope of your consent. Proof. I knew exactly where to get it. That evening, I drove to his office downtown. The sign above the glass door read, Henderson Property Management. Through the window, I saw him laughing with 2 men in suits, a glass of whiskey in his hand. For a moment, I didn't recognize him. He looked powerful, charming, like Peter had once looked when he'd landed a big contract. But Peter had never lied to me. When he finally noticed me standing outside, his smile faltered. He gestured for the others to wait and stepped out. Mom, he said, voice tight, this isn't the time. Then tell me when is the time, I shot back. After you drain what's left of my savings? After you sell the car too? He glanced around, embarrassed. You can't just show up here. I gave you everything, I said. Your father's house, my trust, my name. And you used all of it like it was trash. He clenched his jaw. You don't understand how the world works anymore. That lake house was a burden. You would have lost it eventually anyway. I just made it easier. And what about my memories, Mark? You going to sell those too? He stared at me then, cold and blank. Memories don't pay bills, Mom. Grow up. That was the moment I realized there was nothing left of the boy I'd raised. Only a stranger wearing his face. When I got home, I called Diane. Do whatever it takes, I said. He's hiding something else. I can feel it. Over the next few days, she dug deeper. Bank statements, email traces, document copies. And then late one night, my phone buzzed. Found something, she whispered. You might want to sit down. I did. Your son didn't just sell the lake house. He mortgaged your pension account last month. He's been siphoning monthly transfers under your name to fund a second property. I froze. What? It's in another county. Same pattern. He's building something new, under his company name, but the seed money came from you. I pressed my hand over my chest, feeling my heartbeat thudding like thunder in my ears. Diane hesitated. Helen, I think he's planning to move fast. He's transferring everything this week. If we don't stop him now, then we stop him, I said quietly. She paused. You sound calm. I'm not, I whispered. I'm just done being blind. After we hung up, I went to the drawer where I'd kept Peter's old revolver license. Not the gun. It was long gone, but the pay. The knock on the window didn't stop. Slow, deliberate, as if whoever stood outside was counting the seconds between each tap. I stood frozen, one hand on the phone, the other gripping the curtain edge. Who's there? My voice came out smaller than I wanted. Nothing, just the wind. Then a shape moved. A man's frame. For a split second, when the lightning flashed over the lake, I saw his face. Mark. Standing in the rain, his collar soaked, eyes hollow and strange. I opened the door before I could think. What are you doing here? He stepped inside without asking, dripping water onto the floorboards. The smell of whiskey hit me first. He'd been drinking. You're making things worse, Mom, he said flatly. I warned you not to go to Diane. I locked the door behind him out of habit. You came all the way here to threaten me? I came to talk. You don't understand what you're getting yourself into. His eyes darted to the window, as if he expected someone to be listening. You can't undo what's been done. The sale is final. If you push this, you'll drag me down, and yourself too. Then maybe that's what I'll do, I said. Drag you down with me, he flinched, then smiled faintly, that same practiced grin. You always were dramatic. I wanted to slap that smirk off his face. Instead, I walked to the fireplace and stared at the ashes of wood I hadn't burned since Peter's death. You forged my signature, Mark. You took the one thing your father and I built with our bare hands. Why? Because I had to, he snapped. You don't get it. The market was right. The loan sharks... He stopped himself. The what? He rubbed his temple. Forget it. You're better off not knowing. That money you took wasn't just numbers on paper, I said quietly. It was my life. Your father's life, he sighed, weary, almost pleading now. You think I wanted to do this? You think I liked hearing you call every week, asking if the bills were paid, if the insurance was still valid? You've been... He hesitated. Oh, wait, Mom. I can't breathe anymore. That word again. Wait. Leech. Each one chipped away a little more of the love I'd carried for him. He turned toward the door. I just came to tell you. Stop whatever you're planning. Diane's not going to win this. She's bluffing. He left without another word, slamming the door behind him so hard the window rattled. I stood there for a long time, listening to the rain swallow the sound of his car as it drove off. When I finally moved, I noticed something glinting on the floor near the entryway. A small silver flash drive. He must have dropped it. I picked it up, heart pounding. Maybe this was the something he didn't want me to know. I called Diane first thing the next morning. He was here, I said, and he left something behind. When she arrived, we plugged the drive into her laptop. It held a folder named LLC Docs. Inside were PDFs, contracts, wiring instructions, scanned signatures. My signatures, Diane leaned closer. Look at the timestamps, she murmured. These were created the week you were admitted to the hospital. He had a notary come to your room. I remembered the woman who'd come in one afternoon, clipboard in hand, asking me to reconfirm my medical preferences. I'd been weak, half asleep from the antibiotics. Mark had been standing right there, reassuring me everything was fine. He used me, I whispered. More than that, Diane said grimly. He used your illness as cover. He probably told the notary you were of sound mind. That gives him temporary immunity unless we can prove coercion. Then we prove it. She nodded. There's more here. See this one, development partnership proposal. He's trying to buy another property on the far side of the lake, using a bridge loan. How much? $500,000. My stomach turned. He'll ruin himself. Not if he flips it before the debt collectors come. The word collectors echoed in my head. Loan sharks. So that was it. He wasn't just greedy. He was desperate. Diane closed the laptop. I'll back these up and contact the DA's office discreetly. But Helen, you need to be careful. If he's tied up with the wrong people, pushing him could make him dangerous. Dangerous? I almost laughed. He's my son. She looked at me sadly. Sometimes that's the most dangerous kind. After she left, I sat by the window for hours, watching the lake shift between gray and silver under the passing clouds. The house across the water, the one Peter and I built, looked tiny from this distance, but the sight of it hurt like an open wound. By dusk, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. Mrs. Henderson? The voice was male, smooth, unfamiliar. This is a courtesy call. You've been asking a lot of questions about your son's business. We'd advise you to stop. My hand tightened around the phone. Who is this? The line went dead. I stared at the silent screen, pulse hammering. He'd involved people, dangerous people, and now they knew my name. That night, I locked every door and window. I slept with the lights on, a kitchen knife under my pillow. Each creak of the floorboards felt like a warning. I thought about calling the police, but what would I even say? My son might have hired criminals to scare me. They'd laugh me out of the station. The next morning, I found tire tracks in the mud outside my house. 2 sets. One leading in, one leading out. I knew then this wasn't going to be just a legal fight. For 2 days, I didn't leave the house. I watched from behind my curtains as strangers drove past slower than usual, their headlights dragging along my porch. My nerves were raw, my coffee untouched, my thoughts spinning between rage and disbelief. Every knock, every ring of the phone felt like another betrayal waiting to happen. Diane came by again on Thursday, a determined look in her eyes. I filed a preliminary injunction, she said as soon as I opened the door. The court's reviewing it. If we're lucky, we can freeze his assets until there's a hearing. Will that stop him? It'll make him nervous, she said. And men like your son make mistakes when they're nervous. She spread her documents across my dining table, affidavits, email logs, transaction screenshots. The proof was there, undeniable. But the law moved slowly, and Mark was already 3 steps ahead. What happens if he hides the money? I asked. Then we go after the people who helped him hide it. Her tone made me shiver. Diane wasn't just a friend now. She was a soldier, and this was war. Later that afternoon, she left to file more paperwork. I stayed behind, replaying every memory of Mark through the years. His first scraped knee, his wedding day, the way he used to call me every Sunday without fail. How did that boy turn into this stranger who saw me as leverage? I didn't notice the car parked at the edge of my yard until dusk. A dark sedan, tinted windows, engine idling. I went out onto the porch, squinting through the fading light. Can I help you? I called. The driver's window rolled down an inch. We're just making sure you're safe, ma'am, a voice said. Mark asked us to check on you. I felt a chill snake up my spine. You tell Mark I don't need his protection. The window rolled back up, the car reversed, and it drove away without another word. When I told Diane later, she exhaled sharply. He's putting people near you to intimidate you. Classic tactic. He's scared we're getting close. Then we keep going, I said. But fear had already seeped in. That night, I sat awake in bed, the moonlight spilling through the blinds, listening for footsteps. Every creak in the hallway felt personal. I couldn't help but wonder if Mark knew what that fear felt like, or if he'd forgotten what it meant to care. By the next morning, news had spread through town. I heard the whispers at the grocery store. Helen's suing her own son, one woman murmured near the fruit stand. Can you imagine? Over a house? She's always been dramatic, another replied. Probably just wants attention. I turned away before they could notice me. Humiliation burned in my chest. It wasn't enough that Mark had stolen my house. Now he'd stolen my reputation too. At home, I found a voicemail waiting on my landline. His voice, calm, calculated. Mom, I heard you've been talking to lawyers. You really shouldn't do that. You're going to ruin everything. Please stop this before it goes too far. Then a pause, and his voice dropped, softer but colder. People get hurt when things go too far. The line clicked off. I sat there shaking until Diane arrived. I played the voicemail for her. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then she stood, jaw tight. That's a threat. I'm forwarding this to the police. But the police, as I soon learned, were hesitant. The officer who came by was young, polite, and clearly uncomfortable. Technically, ma'am, it's vague. Not enough to press charges. Until I end up dead? I asked bitterly. He didn't answer. He just handed me his card. That night, Diane stayed with me. We talked until the fire burned low, mostly about things that weren't legal at all. Memories, regrets, husbands long gone. You know, she said softly, sometimes blood isn't family. Sometimes family is whoever helps you survive. I smiled faintly. Peter used to say the same. Before she left the next morning, she handed me a manila envelope. This is everything we have so far. Keep it safe. If something happens to me or you, someone needs to know the truth. Her words lingered like smoke. The following afternoon, I went to town to buy groceries. When I came out of the store, I noticed my tires, slashed, all four. Clean cuts, deliberate. I stood there, staring at the deflated rubber as people walked past pretending not to see. I didn't need to ask who'd done it. I already knew. The humiliation was unbearable. I called Diane, my hands trembling. He's trying to break me, I said. Then don't let him, she answered. He wants you scared and isolated. We'll report it and use it as evidence. Every act of intimidation strengthens our case. But fear wasn't the only thing rising inside me now. Something darker, heavier, determination. When I got home, I went through every document again, searching for a thread, a clue, anything he'd missed. That's when I saw it, a folder labeled Insurance Claim Parent, hidden deep in one of the scanned directories. I opened it, and my blood ran cold. It was a life insurance policy updated 3 months ago. My name listed as the insured. Mark listed as the sole beneficiary. The value? $300,000. My hands began to shake so violently I almost dropped the laptop. Dear God, I whispered. He's planning for more than my money. I printed the document and called Diane immediately. She answered on the first ring. Diane, listen carefully. There's an insurance policy. He's listed as beneficiary. Dated after the sale. Send it to me, she said quickly. Do not confront him. Do you hear me? Let me handle it. I promised her I would. But promises are easy to make when you're terrified. That night I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the phone. His number glowed on the screen. I shouldn't have called, but I did. When he answered, his voice was smooth as ever. Mom? You took out a policy in my name. A pause. You shouldn't have found that. What are you planning, Mark? My voice trembled. Are you waiting for me to die now, too? His tone shifted darker. Don't be dramatic. It's just paperwork. You're getting old. I'm making sure things are handled. I could hear someone laughing faintly in the background. A woman's voice. Who's there with you? I asked. He chuckled. Don't worry about it. Get some rest, Mom. You sound tired. Then the line went dead. I stared at the phone until the screen dimmed, a hollow ringing in my ears. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound in the house scraped against my nerves. The clock ticked louder than usual. The refrigerator hummed like a warning. Somewhere outside, a car door slammed, and I froze with my hand halfway to the light switch. When the phone rang at 2:14 a.m., I nearly screamed. It wasn't Diane. It wasn't the police. The number was blocked. I answered anyway. Mom, Mark's voice drawled through static. You shouldn't talk to Diane anymore. She's not who you think she is. Mark, please. She's lying to you, he continued, words slow and deliberate. She's using you. You think she's helping? She's setting you up to lose everything. You can't trust her. He paused, as if to let the poison sink in. You were always easy to manipulate. You still are. Then he hung up. I stood there, the phone pressed to my ear long after the line went dead, shaking from a cold that had nothing to do with the weather. His voice had sounded different, sharper, meaner, as though the son I'd loved had been replaced entirely by someone else. By morning, my decision was made. I drove to Diane's office before she opened, clutching the manila folder she'd given me. I told her what he said. She frowned, clearly fighting to stay calm. He's trying to isolate you. Classic psychological control. You can't let him. I know. I set the folder on her desk. But I can't just wait anymore. He's dangerous, Diane. A knock interrupted us. Diane rose to answer it. On the other side of the glass door stood a man in a dark gray suit holding an envelope. Delivery for Helen Henderson. Diane accepted it, frowning as the man walked away without another word. The envelope was heavy, embossed with a legal firm's logo I didn't recognize. I tore it open and froze. Inside were glossy photographs. Me. Taken through windows, across streets, at the grocery store. Some from days ago, others from last week. Every image labeled with a time and date. At the bottom, a note written in Mark's handwriting. "Still think you can win?" My knees gave out. Diane caught me before I hit the floor. "This is stalking," she hissed. "We're going to the police again." But I shook my head, numb. No, he's not just watching me. He's letting me know he can reach me whenever he wants. I spent that night at Diane's house, too afraid to go home. She offered me her guest room, a small, warm space filled with the faint scent of lavender. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of safety. But peace never lasts long when betrayal is breathing down your neck. At dawn, Diane's phone buzzed. She frowned at the screen, then went pale. "Helen, you need to see this." She handed me the phone. On the town's local Facebook page, someone had posted photos, those same pictures from the envelope. The caption read, "Elderly woman accused of defrauding her son during house sale. Court case pending." Within minutes, the comments poured in. Strangers debating my life, calling me greedy, ungrateful, senile. One said, "Can't believe she'd sue her own child. Disgusting." My throat closed. "He did this," I whispered. "He's turning the town against me." Diane was already on her laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. "He's using a fake account. I'll trace it." But this kind of defamation spreads fast. It did. By noon, my phone was full of missed calls from neighbors, church friends, even the pastor's wife. Some were sympathetic, others less so. I stopped answering altogether. That evening, Diane suggested we meet the following morning to finalize our next move. She was going to contact a journalist friend who could expose the fraud publicly. For the first time, I felt a sliver of hope. I drove home that night under a bruised purple sky. The rain had stopped, but the road shimmered with puddles that reflected the headlights like broken glass. When I reached my porch, the door was slightly open. I froze. I'd locked it before leaving. Slowly, I pushed it wider. The living room light was on. My heart pounded. Then I heard it. A laugh, familiar, mocking. He was sitting on my couch. My son. My Mark. "Don't look so surprised, Mom," he said, leaning back, legs crossed, as if he owned the place. "I figured I'd save you the trouble of calling." "How did you get in?" He jingled a key. "You never changed the locks." I took a step back. "You had no right." "No right?" He stood, closing the space between us. "You're suing me, dragging my name through town, making me look like a criminal. You left me no choice." I could see the fury simmering beneath his calm surface. "This isn't about money anymore, is it?" I asked. He laughed once. "It's always about money, Mom." "Then take what you want and leave me alone." "Oh, I intend to." "But you see, you've become a liability. People are asking questions. The investors are nervous. I need them calm. Investors? Let's just say the people I owe aren't very patient." His words sliced through the air like glass. He moved closer, his breath warm with alcohol. "You could make this all go away, you know. Drop the case. Sign a statement saying you misunderstood. Tell everyone it was just a miscommunication between family. And if I don't?" His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Then maybe the next time someone calls you at 2 a.m., it won't just be a warning." I stared at him, my pulse thudding. "You wouldn't dare," he shrugged. "You don't know me as well as you think you do." He started for the door, then paused, turning back. "Oh, and one more thing. You might want to check your mailbox tomorrow. I sent something special." He left, slamming the door behind him. I stood there shaking until his footsteps faded down the path. Then I collapsed onto the couch, gasping, trying to catch my breath. When morning came, I forced myself to walk to the mailbox. The air was crisp, sharp with the scent of pine and rain. Inside, a single envelope. My name typed neatly across the front. I opened it and felt the ground tilt beneath me. It was a photograph of me, standing beside Peter's grave, except someone had written across the image in thick black ink, "Next." After that photograph, after the single word scrawled across Peter's grave like a coin dropped in an empty well, something inside me unstitched. The fear was still there, a cold animal twitching in my ribs, but under it was a clarity I hadn't felt since I'd stood at the lake the morning after Peter died. The kind of clarity that strips everything down to what matters and leaves no room for sentiment. Diane was the first to see that look on my face and not flinch. She sat across from me at her kitchen table, the same one where we'd patched up report cards and planned class trips decades ago. Only now the papers between us were subpoenas and bank statements instead of permission slips. "You're different," she said quietly. "Something's stealing you." "Someone told me I was next," I said. He put a photo at my mailbox. "He made sure the town hears what he wants them to hear. He's trying to shrink me." Diane folded her hands. "That's what cowards do. They try to make you small so you stop breathing. But you got a spine for stubbornness, Helen. Use it." So I did. The first few days after that were all about fences. Not metaphorical ones, but the very practical kind. I changed my locks with Diane standing by like a bodyguard, went to the bank, and froze accounts Diane instructed me to, and I called the phone company and had my numbers rerouted. I learned to move like a person who doesn't want to be caught unawares. Lights on timers, a neighbor who promised to check in, a different route to the grocery store so the car I'd seen wouldn't know which driveway to wait by. But the real work, the part that would sting him the most, was slow, precise, and patient. Revenge without a plan is noise. Revenge with proof is a sentence. Diane taught me to read the language of money the way I'd once taught a class to read poetry. Bank statements were now sonnets of guilt. Wire transfers formed neat lines. Invoices repeated like a chorus. We started at the obvious: the LLC, the transfer trail between Mark's company and the Colemans, the bridge loans. Diane pulled up the folder he'd left on the flash drive and printed everything. Page after page of signatures that looked like mine, timestamps that matched the week I'd been sedated with antibiotics, invoices with vendor names I'd never heard of, and a long list of small payments funneled through shell accounts. But what made men like Mark dangerous was not only their willingness to commit the crime, it was their arrogance. They trusted their own cleverness. They assumed shortcuts, an unencrypted laptop, a shared email password. A manila folder left in an unlocked desk drawer would never betray them. They were wrong. I spent hours combing through the PDFs, tracing a single thread that might lead to the knot. There it was, almost invisible, an email chain between Mark and a man named Gregory Hale, time-stamped at 3 a.m. Gregory's address was for a small consulting firm in the city. The subject line read simply, "Parent Insurance." Diane called Gregory's firm posing as a concerned investor. Men with suits and names like Gregory think the best defense is to talk to strangers on the phone with confidence. They rarely expect to be prodded. She arranged a meeting under the pretense of discussing a separate property. While she kept Gregory busy, I called the city records office and pulled the development permits connected to Mark's new project. There, hidden in layers of corporate names, I found an address, a warehouse 2 counties over. The warehouse was the kind of place you forget to notice until your life depends on remembering it. Corrugated metal, a faded sign, security lights that blinked but rarely worked. Diane and I drove there early on a cold weekday, the sky a dull sheet. I suppose I imagined a showdown. Instead, we found only bureaucratic detritus, shipping manifests, a pallet of office chairs, a dusty copier. But among the boxes in a back office, I discovered a ledger, handwritten, messy, and deliciously human. It listed payments, dates, small sums, initials. Beneath one line in a different ink was a name I recognized, Henderson, Pension Reallocation. It hit me like cold rain. He hadn't just taken what I knew about. He'd been moving money for months, siphoning tiny amounts so no single transfer would trigger alarm. The ledger gave me the pattern, a breadcrumb trail of theft, but the ledger was also an admission. Whoever had kept records had been sloppy with them. There were names of 2 men who'd helped move wire transfers and a note that read, "Insurance, make beneficiary Mark." The handwriting looked like Gregory's. His neat curl matched the signatures we'd seen. We photographed everything. On the drive back, Diane's face was taut. "This is enough for the DA to act," she said. "If we go to a judge with this ledger and the flash drive, we can get emergency subpoenas, freeze accounts, and—" She paused. "We can also expose him publicly. People respond to facts." "We'll need more than the ledger," I said. "We need him to admit it. Or better, someone who will talk." Diane nodded. I have a contact, an investigative reporter who likes taking on small-town corruption. If we give her what she needs, this becomes a story that won't let the town forget." That night, I sat surrounded by the documents we'd collected like bones spread on a table. I ran my finger along the ledger lines again. Mark's handwriting was not there, just initials and shorthand, but his fingerprints would be. I thought about the nights I'd rocked him when he had fevers, the time he'd cried on my shoulder when he lost his first job. I thought about how once, when he was 5, he'd drawn our family with thick crayons. A small house, a father with broad shoulders, and a stick-figure child holding my hand. My hand had always been there for him. It felt foreign now, like a keepsake in someone else's drawer. We moved carefully, urgently. Diane filed for emergency subpoenas and a temporary restraining order, citing intimidation, stalking, and financial fraud. The judge signed them in a flurry of ink that felt like the closing slat of a shutters on a house that had kept its secrets for too long. A sheriff's deputy came by with papers to serve Mark, and for a moment I felt light, like someone had opened a window in a suffocating room. But the opening of a window doesn't stop a fire. It stokes the draft. Within 24 hours, Mark retaliated. Not with a phone call, not with threats. He struck where he knew the sting would be sharpest, my standing in the church and among those I loved. Sunday morning, the choir director shuffled past me as if I were a ghost. The pastor's wife avoided eye contact. Whispers followed me down the aisle. Later, at coffee hour, someone dropped a folded leaflet into my hand. It was a printout from the same Facebook page that had put my life on display. A smear piece dressed as concern for the town's welfare. Diane saw my face and squeezed my hand under the table. "Ignore it," she said. "We'll let the reporter handle public opinion. I wanted to be above it." I really did. But later that afternoon, a church board member called and asked to meet. The meeting was civil in tone, but brutal in subtext. "Helen," she said, stirring her tea as if it had nothing to do with me, "we're worried about the parish. These accusations are difficult. Perhaps it would be best if you took some time away." The words were polite. The meaning was blunt. Leave. Become small. Disappear. I left feeling twice as exposed as before. That night, determined not to be driven away, I walked to the lake. I needed the water's hush, the way it reminded me of what I was defending. The house across the water glowed faintly in the distance. I could see a silhouette move, someone inside. Was it Mark? Investors? New owners? I couldn't tell. I leaned on the railing and listened to the slow breath of the lake. It was there, in the steady rhythm of the water, that the plan sharpened. I would not only take the evidence to the DA and the reporter, I would also give him a mirror. Men like Mark act like their deeds exist in shadows. If I could reflect his shadow in the town's light, if I could show his friends, his investors, his lenders, what he'd done in plain daylight, pride would force him to act rashly. Pride was a brittle thing. He would break himself trying to hide the crack, so I set a trap that required patience. I fed small, believable stories to people I trusted, and some I didn't, letting hints of the ledger and the warehouse leak without revealing the whole. I made sure there were witnesses who could say they saw me at Diane's, that I had called a reporter, that I'd been making copies of documents. If Mark tried to claim I was fabricating, the town would already have heard a counterstory. And then, on an ordinary Thursday, as I filed more copies into the envelope I planned to hand to the reporter, the phone rang. The voice on the other end was Gregory Hale. "Mrs. Henderson?" he said, voice mild. "Do you know anything about an insurance policy in your name?" His question was casual. My reply was not. "Yes," I said. "I know everything I need to know," he hummed. "Interesting, because someone's been making noise. Investors are nervous. They asked me to make a call. On whose behalf?" I asked. Silence for a heartbeat. Then Gregory's voice dropped, small and uncertain. "I can't talk long." "Then talk now. Listen," he said. "If you keep pushing, people get hurt. Your son, he's made choices. We did what we had to do to keep projects moving. We?" I spat. "You mean you did what you had to do? You used me." There was a shuffling sound. Paper. Then, shocking in its simplicity, Gregory said, "Mark's got people on the edge. They don't like being stalled." A soft click. The line went dead. I sat back in my chair and felt the room tilt. Not because I was surprised, because I wasn't. but because I understood the stakes more clearly than ever. This wasn't just about contracts or greed. It was a machine with teeth, and my son had greased it with my name. I closed my eyes and breathed deep, tasting the lake's memory in my mind. The ledger was in my bag. Diane had the padlock codes to the warehouse. The reporter would meet me tomorrow at noon. If they wanted a war, I would give them one. But I would do it carefully, with witnesses, with evidence, with the kind of cold, patient cruelty that broke men who had thought themselves untouchable. The first move had been his. Now the board was set. All that was left was to tip the pieces. I woke early the next morning and dressed in my plainest dress. No jewelry, no color that might draw attention. Revenge looks better when it's disguised as practicality. Diane arrived with a folder thicker than I'd expected, and a calm I borrowed like a coat. We drove to the city, windows up against the cold. The ledger and flash drive tucked into a small briefcase between us like contraband. The reporter's office was tucked above a bakery that smelled of cinnamon and warm bread. She greeted us with the quick, appraising look of someone who's seen too many confessions and not enough truth. "You have to understand," she said as soon as we sat. "If I run this, it'll go everywhere. People will come at you from all sides." Her name was Mara, and there was a steel under her smile. "Perfect. We understand," Diane said. "We have documents, a ledger, timestamps, and a witness who will go on record about the notary in the hospital." Diane slid the flash drive across the table. Mara's fingers paused over it like a pianist before a key. "You sure you want the public eye?" Mara asked me, soft but firm. "This will get messy." "I don't want messy," I said. "I want the truth in daylight." The way I said it surprised me, a small, steady ember of something that wasn't fear. Mara worked fast. She ran the files, asked pointed questions, and promised a careful approach. Her plan was surgical. Publish an exposé that would focus less on me and more on the money trail. If the town had to pick sides, she'd make sure the facts were visible in plain print. "People are more forgiving of mothers than of men with suits," she joked. But her eyes were serious. "We'll make sure your side is heard." We gave her everything. The ledger, the flash drive, the insurance policy. Diane also handed over bank statements showing tiny, consistent reallocations. My pension nudged here, a payment there, so minor each time that only someone watching month to month would notice the pattern. We left Mara with instructions to hold the story until we had the DA's involvement as well. Public pressure would make the office move. On our way back, Diane drove slower than usual. "We can't assume the DA will move in time," she said. "We need to pin one of his associates down, someone willing to talk." "How?" I asked. "People in that ledger aren't untouchable," Diane replied. "They're often small-time men who hate big-time men when they feel betrayed. We offer them protection, and often a better deal than the man who used them. I'll call in a favor." She did. Within 48 hours, we had a name. Luis Ortega, a middle manager who'd handled transfers and accounts, but who'd gotten cold feet when money started disappearing. Diane arranged a meeting in a diner far from town, neutral ground with good coffee and slow waitstaff. Luis arrived jittery, his hands trembling around a paper cup. He didn't want to talk at first. He kept his head down, muttered about family and debts. But Diane moved like a conductor, patient and precise. She offered him a chance to come clean to the DA, to testify in exchange for leniency. She promised confidentiality where she could, and the protection of the law. Martin's men, Gregory's people, had a way of making promises they didn't keep. A lawyer's promise, Diane explained, had teeth. Luis eventually unfolded. He spoke of late-night calls, of making numbers match, of a man with a warm smile who'd always seemed 2 steps ahead. "They told me to put it through like normal," he said. "But after a while, little transfers to a pension account, then a bigger one, they said it was consolidation. I told them it didn't sit right. They told me to keep quiet. I kept quiet until they started asking for more." He produced a phone record, calls to Gregory, calls to anonymous numbers. He handed over a scrap of a receipt for a notary service. He described the warehouse, the ledger, the men who liked to move money without leaving fingerprints. His voice was small, but it held a kernel of truth that warmed like a light. When Luis left, Diane and I sat quietly, each letting the relief settle like a cool hand. "We're getting close," she said. "Too close for comfort." Over the next week, the town's air tasted different. It was as if someone had opened a window and let the light in. Mara's piece ran in the regional paper, careful, precise, a map of wire transfers and signed documents, with me framed as a wronged woman rather than a villain. The headline read, "Local widow alleges son used power of attorney to flip family property. Investigation underway." The story spread. My phone rang with sympathy and anger in equal measure. Some called to support me. Others, still convinced by Mark's smear campaign, called with knives in their words. But the narrative was changing. People read the ledger and the notary's affidavit and began to ask different questions at church and at the grocery store. The whispering lost its rhythm. Then the DA moved faster than we expected. A subpoena, emergency hearings, a freeze on accounts we had thought unreachable. The court summons came with the authority of a hammer. For the first time since the sale, I slept without clutching the phone. But power makes men desperate. Mark saw the net closing. He lashed out. He called Diane, then the sheriff, threatening suits and defamation charges. He filed countersuits, accused me of elder fraud, and painted himself as the betrayed son. The town's mood swung between pity and outrage. It was exhausting, but underneath it all, things were tilting. The revelation that changed everything happened on a rainy Thursday, when I least expected it. Diane had been in court all morning, and I waited in the hallway, fingers worrying at my dress. Luis had agreed to testify. We had his written statement. The DA wanted to move quickly to keep Mark from liquidating more assets. My hands shook as I stood to leave when the courthouse doors burst open and a man in a gray suit pushed through, breathless. It was Gregory Hale. He scanned the lobby, eyes landing on me. For a moment his face was a mask of practiced indifference. Then he moved toward us, and behind him 2 men I recognized from the warehouse ledger flanked him. I felt every hair on my arms stand up. "Mrs. Henderson," Gregory said, voice polite. "A pleasure." He stepped closer, and something in his hand caught the fluorescent light. It was a small silver envelope, the kind restaurants use to tuck receipts. He held it out to me like an offering. "We thought you might want this." Diane's jaw tightened. I did not reach for it. "What is it?" I asked. Gregory smiled the way someone does when they know a game is nearly won. "Consider it a gesture of goodwill," he said. "We found these in Mark's office. We didn't want you to be surprised." Inside the envelope were photographs, dozens of them, taken at odd angles, awkward moments I'd never wanted recorded. Me meeting with Mara, me signing an affidavit in Diane's office, my hands on the ledger, my face in close-up talking on the phone. Each photograph had scribbled annotations in Gregory's neat hand: setup, staged, payoff. On the back of the top photo, in thick black marker, was a single sentence: "Make her look like a liar." Burn her credibility first. I felt the world tilt again, but this time not with fear, with a cold, hard clarity. He'd been preparing to discredit me all along, to build a narrative that would make every document seem forged and every witness coached. "You expect this to stop us?" Diane asked quietly. "We have witnesses who will swear under oath. We have bank records. We have a ledger from your warehouse." Gregory's smile widened, and for the first time, I glimpsed fear in his eyes. "We also have friends," he said. "People who stand to lose a lot." He gestured to the men behind him, who shifted their weight like wolves waiting for instruction. The threat was heavy and immediate. But the revelation, what turned the scale, was not the threats or the staged photos. It was, instead, a single piece of paper tucked beneath the photographs, a signed contract between Gregory's consulting firm and Mark's LLC. On the line where Gregory should have initialed, there was another name, Mark Henderson, and beneath it, in a looping scrawl I knew too well, was my own signature. Gregory had been sloppy. In his confidence, he'd included a copy with original signatures to keep his files clean, and somehow a real copy, my real signature, had slipped into his hand. It was the smoking gun we'd needed, the explicit link between the men moving the money and the signatures they'd used to make it all look legitimate. I felt a strange calm settle over me as I read my name on that paper, the same signature that had once signed promissory notes and love letters. I saw in a flash Peter standing in the carpenter's shop, offering me a hand-sanded plank, telling me to keep the hammer steady. This signature had been meant to bind a marriage and a life. Now it would bind a truth. Diane slid the paper into my hand. "This goes to the DA," she said. "This proves collusion." Gregory's shoulders slumped for a beat. He had been counting on control. Control was cracking. The men behind him shifted, uncertain, as if someone had turned the tide beneath their feet. In that hallway, flooded with the noise of footsteps and distant voices, something fundamental changed. The game he'd set into motion, the lies, the staged photos, the social smear, was now matched by a document that could not be easily dismissed. I folded the paper carefully and slipped it into my purse. My hands did not shake. My heart did not race. For the first time since this all began, I felt the scale tip in my favor. We were not done. There would be hearings, dangers, and more nastiness to come. But a revelation had been made. The men who thought they held all the cards had left something that proved their hand. As I walked out of the courthouse, the rain had started again. It didn't feel like an omen. It felt like a curtain being raised on the next act. The courthouse doors groaned behind us as Diane and I stepped into the rain. The sky was a hard slate gray, the kind of color that warned of storms to come. She tucked the evidence folder under her coat, shielding it like a living thing. "We'll drive straight to the DA's office," she said. I don't want that paper out of sight, but I barely heard her. Something inside me was shifting, not rage anymore. Not fear, focus. Cold, surgical focus. We reached her car, but before she could start the engine, I saw a figure leaning against the hood of a black sedan parked 2 spaces down. Umbrella in hand, head bowed. When he looked up, my breath caught. Mark. He wasn't supposed to be here. The sheriff had served him papers that morning. His accounts were frozen. His smile, however, hadn't changed. Still that calm, rehearsed expression that once charmed teachers and girlfriends. He sauntered over as though nothing was wrong. "Mom," he said, voice too smooth. "I've been trying to reach you." Diane straightened in her seat. "You can talk through your attorney." Mark ignored her, leaning slightly toward my window. "I heard you've been playing detective. You think you've won, don't you? That little ledger doesn't mean anything. Those men, they'll deny everything. Then why are you here?" I asked quietly. He tilted his head, rain dripping from the brim of his umbrella. "To give you one last chance to stop before this gets uglier." Diane rolled down her window halfway. "This conversation is over." He didn't move. "You're being manipulated, Mom. That lawyer, that reporter, they're using you for their own gain. You really think anyone cares about you once this is over? You'll be yesterday's pity story." I looked him straight in the eyes. "I'd rather be yesterday's pity story than tomorrow's accomplice." Something dark flickered behind his calm. "You always were dramatic," he murmured, echoing the same words he'd used the night he sold my house. "But you're making a mistake." He stepped back, turned toward his car. Then he said, almost casually, "It'd be a shame if something happened to Diane, wouldn't it? She's been in the way." Diane's hand froze on the steering wheel. "Was that a threat?" He smiled without answering, then slid into his sedan and drove off, tires hissing through puddles. Diane exhaled slowly, eyes following his taillights. "He's losing control," she said. "That's when people like him get sloppy." "We're close." We went straight to the DA's office. Inside, a woman named Carla Rivera, all sharp edges and no nonsense, reviewed our documents. When she saw the signed contract connecting Gregory's firm and Mark's LLC, she sat back in her chair. "You've done half my job for me," she said. "We'll bring them in for questioning tomorrow. I'll need you both present tomorrow." The word carried weight, final and electric. We left the office under flickering fluorescent lights, both silent, both understanding the same thing. Once the questioning began, Mark's facade would crack. That night back home, I tried to rest. The lake outside was restless, the wind dragging waves against the shore. I thought about Peter, how he'd always faced storms head-on, never ducked behind excuses. He used to say, "Truth doesn't fear thunder, Helen. It only fears silence." I wasn't silent anymore. Still, I double-checked the locks, drew the curtains tight, and left a lamp burning in every room. Somewhere past midnight, I heard a car again, slow, crawling along the gravel road. The crunch of tires was unmistakable. I peeked through the curtain. Headlights idled in the distance. My stomach twisted. It wasn't Mark's sedan. Too big, too boxy. A truck, maybe. Then, after a minute, the lights blinked once and turned off. I called Diane immediately. "Someone's outside. I'm on my way," she said, voice steady. "Don't open the door." I sat by the kitchen table, one hand clutching the cordless phone, the other gripping Peter's old brass candlestick like a weapon. Minutes stretched into hours. The only sound was the rain ticking against the roof. When headlights finally appeared again, this time blue and red flashing through the rain, my knees nearly gave out. Diane had called the sheriff on her way. 2 deputies searched the property but found nothing. "Probably kids," one said. "Stormy nights make people imagine things." But as they turned to leave, one deputy paused by the mailbox. "Ma'am?" he called. There was something inside, a plastic bag. Inside it, ashes, charred paper, the faint smell of gasoline. Diane and I looked at each other as he poured the contents gently onto the hood of his cruiser. The papers were half burned but legible in places. My name, my address, and, at the corner of one page, the faint header of Rivera County District Attorney's Office. "He's trying to scare us," Diane whispered. "Or destroy evidence before it lands," the deputy frowned. "This came from your office?" Diane nodded. Tomorrow's questioning might need to move up. We barely slept. At dawn, we drove back to the DA's office, where Carla greeted us with eyes that said she hadn't either. "We raided Gregory Hale's firm this morning," she said. "He's missing. His assistant says he packed up last night. But we found this on his desk." She slid over a flash drive. The label read, "For Helen." My hands trembled as I plugged it into the computer. There was a single video file. The screen flickered to life, grainy security footage, time-stamped 2 weeks earlier. A dim office, Gregory sitting at his desk, Mark pacing in front of him. The audio was faint, but their voices were clear enough. "Mark, she's pushing too hard. I told you to handle it." Gregory, "I did. She's got copies." Her lawyer's stubborn. Mark, "Then make it look like an accident. A break-in, something. Just get her out of the way before she drags me down." The sound of rain on the video matched the storm outside my own window. Carla froze the frame. "This," she said quietly, "is conspiracy and attempted harm. We'll get warrants today." My chest felt hollow. My own son, my child, had given an order to hurt me. I didn't cry. Not then. The tears came later, when I stepped outside the building and felt the first warmth of daylight breaking through the clouds. Diane stood beside me, silent, protective. "We have him now," she said. "This is the end of it." But as she spoke, a black sedan rolled slowly down the street, identical to Mark's, windows tinted. It paused by the curb. For a moment, I saw the outline of a driver, not Mark, someone bigger, bulkier. Then the car turned the corner and disappeared. Diane noticed my stare. "What?" "Nothing," I said, though my voice shook. "Let's just go." That night, as I packed my documents and prepared for court, I heard the news bulletin on TV. Police investigating suspicious fire at a downtown law office. 1 injured, name withheld pending identification. The camera panned over flames, licking the night sky. My blood went cold. Diane's office building. I grabbed the phone, dialing her number. Straight to voicemail. Again. And again. Then the landline rang. I snatched it up, desperate. A voice I didn't recognize spoke, calm and low. "Mrs. Henderson," it said. "You should stop looking for Diane. She won't be at court tomorrow." The line clicked dead. My fingers went numb around the receiver. Through the window, down by the lake, I saw headlights glint once across the water, then fade into the dark. The courthouse smelled of rain and floor polish, a mixture of nerves and bureaucracy. Reporters were already crowding the steps by the time I arrived, microphones like bayonets glinting under the gray morning sky. Diane should have been beside me, sharp and steady, but her chair at the plaintiff's table sat empty. The fire had taken half her office and put her in the hospital with burns on her arm. She was alive, barely, but she'd called that morning, voice hoarse from smoke. "Finish it," she'd whispered. "Make him say it out loud." So I walked in alone. Inside, the gallery buzzed. Every face seemed familiar, neighbors, parishioners, the same people who'd whispered behind my back at the grocery store. Now they whispered again, but softer. Pity mixed with fascination. The bailiff called the session to order, and the sound of the gavel cracked through the room like a gunshot. Case number 21-1579. Henderson vs. Henderson, LLC, the clerk announced. Mark sat across from me at the defense table, dark suit crisp, jaw set. He didn't look like a man cornered. He looked like a man rehearsing charm. His lawyer, a young man with too much gel in his hair, whispered something that made him smirk. For a heartbeat our eyes met. I saw nothing there that I recognized. Judge Coleman, a broad-shouldered woman with reading glasses halfway down her nose, scanned the file. "We are here to determine the legality of the property transfer and related financial conduct." Her gaze flicked from him to me. "Mrs. Henderson, your counsel?" I stood. "Representing myself, Your Honor. My attorney is hospitalized." The judge's brow lifted slightly. "Very well, proceed." My hands didn't shake. "Your Honor," I began, "this isn't just about a deed. It's about trust signed away under anesthesia, about a son who sold his mother's home while she was fighting for breath." Murmurs rippled through the room. I placed the folder on the podium. Exhibit A, the power of attorney forms notarized during my hospitalization. The notary has already submitted an affidavit stating she was misled about my condition. The judge nodded to the clerk, who collected the papers. Admitted. Across the aisle, Mark's lawyer rose. "Objection to characterization. There's no proof of coercion." "Overruled," the judge said. "You'll have your turn, counselor." I moved on, sliding another set of pages forward. Exhibit B, the financial ledger recovered from the warehouse belonging to Henderson Enterprises, LLC. Handwritten. Entries show withdrawals from my pension account, totaling $87,000. I held up the photographs of the burned fragments the sheriff had found in my mailbox. He tried to destroy the originals. The lawyer muttered something to Mark. Mark's jaw tightened. For the first time, I saw sweat at his temple. Then came the flash drive, the video. The judge watched as the projection screen flickered on. Gregory Hale's office appeared, the timestamp glowing at the corner, the sound faint but unmistakable. "Mark, she's pushing too hard." "Make it look like an accident." Gasps scattered through the gallery. Someone whispered, "Oh my God!" Mark leapt up. "That video is fabricated. Anyone can edit." "Sit down," the judge barked. I turned toward him, voice steady. "That's your voice, Mark. You wanted to silence me. And when you couldn't, you tried to burn the evidence." He stared back, lips curling. "You think you're clever? You don't know half of what you're dealing with." "Then enlighten us," the judge said dryly. His lawyer tugged at his sleeve, but Mark jerked free. "My mother's senile," he snapped. "She signed everything willingly. She doesn't remember because she was medicated. I saved her from foreclosure." A low murmur swept through the room. The judge raised a hand. "You will provide proof of that claim, Mr. Henderson. Do you have medical documentation authorizing the sale?" Silence. I opened the last envelope, the one Gregory had handed me days before. "Your Honor, Exhibit C, the contract between Mr. Henderson's company and Gregory Hale Consulting. Note the signatures." The judge leaned forward. "I see the defendant's name and another. Mrs. Henderson, that is indeed your signature?" "It is, Your Honor," I said, voice breaking for the first time. "But it was taken from a hospital consent form, copied, traced, and used to steal my home." Mark's lawyer objected again, but the judge's gavel silenced him. "Counsel, if these documents are authenticated, your client faces not only civil penalties, but potential criminal charges." Mark's mask cracked. He leaned toward the microphone. "You can't prove intent." Diane's empty chair seemed to breathe beside me, an invisible presence whispering, "Yes, we can." I took a step closer to the bench. "Your Honor, intent is in his own words." I nodded to the clerk, who replayed the short audio clip from the flash drive, a different file we'd found the night before. In it, Mark told Gregory, "She'll sign whatever I put in front of her. She owes me." The courtroom went silent. The only sound was the judge's pen clicking once before she set it down. Court will recess for 10 minutes, she said, voice tight. Mr. Henderson, remain seated. Mrs. Henderson, you may step outside. The hallway outside the courtroom smelled of damp coats and coffee. Reporters hovered near the water fountain, whispering into phones. When I stepped out, the flash of a camera blinded me for a second. Questions fired like bullets. Mrs. Henderson, did your son really order an attack? Do you feel safe returning home? Is it true your lawyer was targeted? I pushed through the crowd, head down. The corridor felt longer than it was. A deputy opened a door at the far end, letting me into a quiet witness room. I exhaled for the first time in hours. A moment later, the door opened again. Mark walked in, unescorted. His lawyer shouted behind him, but he ignored it. The deputy hesitated, then stayed by the door, hand on his holster. Mom, he said softly, we need to talk. I didn't turn. You should be in your seat. He took a few steps closer. Everything's spiraling. Gregory's gone. The investors are panicking. The judge is eating this up. You can still stop it. Withdraw the suit. Tell them you overreacted. You forged my signature, I said. You drained my pension. You told a man to make me disappear. His jaw clenched. You think you can prove that? You can't even prove Gregory didn't edit that tape. Then why did you come here? I asked quietly. To gloat or to beg? He hesitated. The mask slipped for just a heartbeat, and I saw something raw flicker in his eyes, fear, maybe shame. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared. You're destroying our family name. For what, a house? It was never about the house, I said. It was about what you became inside it. The deputy stepped forward. Mr. Henderson, you need to return to the courtroom. Mark ignored him. You think those people in there care about you? Once this is over, they'll move on. You'll be the crazy old lady who sued her son. I'm your blood, Mom. They're nothing. I turned then, finally facing him. Blood doesn't make you family. Choices do. For a long moment we stood like that, mother and son, years of love and betrayal balancing on silence. Then his expression hardened. You'll regret this, he whispered. You always overplayed your hand. He walked out, the door slamming behind him. The deputy gave me an uneasy glance, but said nothing. When the recess ended, the courtroom was a different place. The DA's office had arrived in force, Carla Rivera leading the team, new evidence folder in hand. The judge called everyone to attention. Before we proceed, the court has received supplemental material from the district attorney. Carla stood, her voice calm but carrying. Your Honor, my office has authenticated the video and recovered matching data from Gregory Hale's computer. The metadata confirms no edits were made after recording. Additionally, Mr. Hale's financial records show direct payments from the defendant's account coinciding with the date of the video. Mark's lawyer paled. We object to the chain of custody. Overruled, the judge said. Carla continued. We also have a witness prepared to testify that Mr. Henderson requested falsified invoices and offered compensation for silencing his mother's counsel. The gallery gasped. Mark shot to his feet. That's a lie. Sit down, the judge snapped again, but Carla wasn't finished. She glanced toward the side door. It opened and a man walked in wearing a dark suit and a bandage across his forehead. Gregory Hale. The room erupted. Reporters surged forward. The bailiff shouted for order. Gregory looked smaller than I remembered, his arrogance replaced by exhaustion. He avoided my eyes as he took the stand. Under oath, his voice shook but didn't falter. Yes, I recorded that conversation. Mark asked me to arrange an accident. I refused. After that, my office was burned. I went into hiding. Why come forward now? The judge asked. Because I realized if I didn't, she'd die and I'd be next. He pointed at Mark, hand trembling. He said he'd clean up loose ends. I believed him. Mark's lawyer objected, but the judge waved him down. The witness will continue. Gregory handed over a small notebook, the same one we'd found at the warehouse. These are my personal notes. They match the ledger entries your office already has. I wrote down everything because I knew one day he'd turn on me. Carla collected the book and nodded to the judge. Your Honor, at this point, we move for an immediate criminal referral for fraud, coercion, and attempted harm. The judge looked at Mark. Mr. Henderson, you are advised to remain silent until counsel consults with you. But Mark didn't remain silent. He stood, face flushed, voice cracking. You're all vultures! That man's a liar. My mother's been manipulated. She's been senile for years. This whole thing is a setup. The judge's gavel slammed. Enough. The sound echoed like thunder. Silence followed. Even the reporters froze, pens mid-air. Then I spoke, my voice steady, each word cutting through the still air. If I were senile, I wouldn't remember the sound of your first cry, or the way your father held you when you took your first steps. But I do. I remember everything, Mark, including the moment you stopped being the boy we raised. For the first time, he couldn't look at me. The judge ordered a recess so the DA could prepare arrest documentation. The bailiff stepped forward, placing a hand on Mark's shoulder, but he shrugged it off. Don't touch me. He turned toward me one last time. You think this is over? You have no idea what you've started. He was escorted out as the crowd murmured. Flashbulbs erupted, the buzz of reporters filling the air again. The courthouse doors opened, letting in a gust of cold wind that smelled like rain and metal. I should have felt triumph. But standing there, I felt only emptiness. As the courtroom cleared, Carla came to me quietly. We'll keep him overnight, she said. But his investors, those people he owed, might not take this quietly. We'll arrange protection. I nodded, numb. She hesitated, lowering her voice. There's one more thing. When we searched his car, we found a prepaid phone. The last outgoing call was to a number registered under your name. My name? I whispered. She nodded. Placed last night at 11:57 p.m. But I didn't make any call, I said. Carla's expression darkened. Then someone did, pretending to be you. The courthouse emptied slowly, leaving the air thick with echo. I sat alone at the plaintiff's table, fingers pressed against the grain of the wood, listening to the distant sound of rain tapping the tall windows. Carla and the deputies were already gone, escorting Mark to a holding room downstairs. For a brief moment, I let myself breathe. It was over, or at least I thought it was. Then the lights flickered. Once, twice, someone in maintenance shouted down the hall. The elevator dinged, its doors sliding open, revealing nothing but an empty cage. A chill swept through the corridor. I gathered my coat and the remaining documents and stepped outside. The storm had broken into a cold drizzle, and the reporters had scattered. The courthouse steps gleamed under the street lamps like wet stone. Carla's car waited at the curb, a deputy at the wheel. We'll take you home, she said, holding the door open. The ride was quiet. I stared out at the slick roads, the lights blurring through the rain. When we reached my driveway, she turned to me. I'll have an officer watch the house tonight. If anything feels wrong, call immediately. I thanked her, stepped out, and watched the cruiser disappear down the road. The lake shimmered in the distance, silver under the storm clouds. My home felt both safer and emptier than ever. I was halfway to the porch when I noticed the door. It wasn't closed. A faint line of light glowed through the crack, swaying with the wind. My heart thudded. I'd locked that door before leaving for court. I pushed it open carefully, every instinct screaming. The living room lamp was on, the one by Peter's old chair. The air smelled faintly of cologne, Mark's brand, the same one Peter had once worn. On the coffee table sat a single object, a key ring, glinting in the lamplight. My old lake house keys, a note lay beneath them. You win the house, but you won't have peace. I turned, every nerve on fire. The shadows near the staircase shifted, movement, soft, deliberate. Who's there? My voice cracked the silence. No answer. Then, from the darkness above, a floorboard creaked. I took a step back, reaching for my phone. Before I could dial, the front door burst open behind me. 2 deputies stormed in, weapons drawn. Carla followed, rain in her hair. Helen, stay back. What's happening? I stammered. We lost him, she said breathlessly. Mark's transport car, he escaped halfway to county. We traced his ankle monitor signal to this road. The deputy moved up the stairs, flashlight slicing through the dark. Another followed toward the back hallway. The whole house hummed with tension. I could hear the rain pounding harder now, the lake wind rising like a living thing. Then, a crash. Glass shattering upstairs. Second floor, the deputy shouted. Carla grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the door. Out now! We barely made it onto the porch when a silhouette appeared at the broken window above, backlit by lightning. Mark, his face pale, eyes wild. Mom, he shouted, voice almost lost in the wind. You ruined everything. Mark, please, stop! I called up, rain stinging my face. The deputies moved in, ordering him to step back. For a moment he did. Then he turned and vanished into the darkness of the hall. One officer ran around the side of the house. Another followed inside. Carla kept her hand firm on my shoulder. Stay put. But the next sound wasn't a shout or gunfire. It was the low groan of wood, the sound of the old back deck giving way under sudden weight. Then a splash, deep and heavy. Lakeside, someone yelled. We ran through the yard, flashlights cutting through rain and mist. The deck behind the house sagged dangerously, one railing broken clean through. Below the water churned, black and wild. A piece of Mark's jacket floated near the reeds. Get a light in there, the deputy ordered. They swept the beam across the surface, nothing but rain and ripples. I stood at the edge, my breath tearing from my chest. Mark! I screamed into the storm. Mark, no answer. Only the lake swallowing the echoes. Carla's hand tightened around my arm. We'll call search and rescue. You need to come inside, but I couldn't move. The sight of the lake pulled me back through decades. Peter teaching Mark to swim, the three of us laughing on the dock, sunlight on the water. Now the same lake that had held our joy was hiding something else. By dawn, they found pieces of the deck, a torn shoe, but no body. The sheriff's report called it an accidental fall during flight. The deputies offered me coffee and silence. Carla promised divers would return at first light. I sat on the porch until morning broke, the lake calm again, deceitfully beautiful. The house felt haunted not by ghosts but by choices, and as the sun lifted through the mist, a faint knock sounded at the door, 3 slow raps. I turned, expecting the deputies, but there was no one there, only another envelope on the welcome mat, soaked from the rain. Inside was a single photograph, the lake, taken from the opposite shore at sunrise. In the corner, scribbled in ink, were the words, "You can't bury blood." The lake stayed restless for 3 days. The divers came and went, their boats slicing through the gray water in patient lines. Reporters gathered again, hungry for an ending, for confirmation that the villain had sunk beneath the surface. Each morning I stood on the porch wrapped in Peter's old coat, watching them drag the same stretch of lake, the same dark mirror that refused to give up its secrets. On the 4th day, they found nothing. No body, no trace of Mark beyond a torn cuff of his jacket snagged on a rock near the far shore. The sheriff said it gently, the way people talk to widows. If he made it out, ma'am, he's long gone. But there was doubt in his eyes. Carla visited that evening, her arm still in a sling from the fall she'd taken during the search. She set a folder on the kitchen table, steam from her coffee fogging the papers. The DA has closed the investigation on your end, she said. They've frozen his assets, seized what's left of the LLC. Everything that can be returned will be. I stared at the folder. And the rest? She hesitated. The rest is gone. Offshore accounts, cash transfers. You'll get the lake house deed back at least. Legally, it's yours again, mine again. The words felt hollow. The house was a skeleton now, rooms still echoing with the sound of boots and arguments. I nodded anyway. Thank you. Carla studied me. You need protection, Helen. If he's alive, he's dangerous. I smiled faintly. If he's alive, he's already punishing himself. She left me with her number and the warning to keep the doors locked. But the truth was, I'd been locking doors all my life, against fear, against loneliness, against the idea that love could rot from the inside. That night, for the first time since the trial, I walked back to the lake. The moon floated above it like an old coin, dull and unsteady. I knelt by the edge, tracing the water with my fingers. It was cold, but not cruel, just indifferent. I did what you told me to, Peter, I whispered. I didn't let anyone take what was ours. The wind rustled through the reeds like a sigh. For a moment, I could almost hear him answer. The weeks after were quiet. Too quiet. The town had moved on to newer scandals. The newspaper printed one last follow-up. Mother regains ownership in fraud case. Son missing, presumed dead. People stopped whispering when I entered the grocery store. Some smiled with awkward pity. Others avoided my eyes. I didn't mind either. Diane was recovering well, her arm wrapped in gauze, her spirit unbroken. When I visited her at the hospital, she grinned weakly. You look lighter, she said. I feel hollow, I admitted. That's the same thing sometimes, she said. Hollow means there's room for something new. We talked about the old school, about Peter, about the lake house. When I told her I wasn't sure I could ever live there again, she nodded. Maybe you shouldn't. Maybe it's meant to be something else now. What, a museum for bad choices? A sanctuary for second chances, she said, and smiled. I didn't answer then, but the idea took root somewhere in the quiet corners of my mind. One afternoon, about a month later, I decided to clean the lake house. The porch boards groaned under my steps, the smell of rain still clinging to the wood. Inside, the air was musty, filled with the ghosts of furniture that wasn't there. Dust coated the windows, but when I wiped it away, sunlight spilled in like forgiveness. Room by room, I opened curtains, swept floors, washed the walls. I found old family photos Mark had left behind, frames turned face down, as if even he couldn't bear to look at them. One of them showed us standing on the dock, Mark maybe 10 years old, water sparkling behind him. I almost threw it away, then stopped. The boy in the photo wasn't the man who betrayed me. He was the child I'd once loved. I placed it on the mantel. When I stepped outside to air the rugs, I saw a figure by the shore, a man, tall, wearing a cap pulled low. My heart seized. Mark? The name left my mouth before I could stop it. The man turned, startled. Not Mark. A fisherman, older, raising a hand in greeting before walking on. I let out a shaky laugh. My mind still played tricks, shaping ghosts out of strangers. That night, the house felt alive again. The floor creaked like it was breathing, the lake whispering through the open windows. I built a small fire in the hearth and sat with a cup of tea. For the first time, I didn't feel afraid, until the knock came. 3 slow knocks, just like before. I froze, heart hammering. Who's there? No answer. The door creaked open. Carla stepped inside, rain dripping from her coat. I didn't mean to scare you, she said, breathless. I came straight from the station. My pulse steadied. You should call first next time. She cut me off, eyes serious. We found something. She handed me a small evidence bag. Inside was a silver bracelet, Mark's, the one Peter had given him at his graduation. It was bent, scorched, but unmistakable. Where? I whispered, 1/2 mile downstream from where he fell. Caught in the reeds, but no body still. I stared at the bracelet. It felt heavy, almost hot through the plastic. You think he's alive? Carla hesitated. We don't know. But if he is, he hasn't used any bank cards or phones. He's vanished. That word didn't comfort me. It sat in my chest like a ticking clock. After she left, I placed the bracelet on the mantel beside the photo. The 2 of them, father and son, side by side again. One framed, one twisted metal. A few weeks later, I reopened the lake house as something new, a small retreat for widows and older women who'd lost their homes or families. Diane helped with the paperwork. Mara wrote a feature story called The House That Betrayal Built. The town rallied behind it. Donations came in. For the first time in years, the place hummed with laughter again, soft, fragile, but real. I named it The Second Shore. Every morning, I'd make coffee for the women staying there, then walk down to the water. Some days the lake was calm. Others it churned with wind. Each time I'd whisper the same words. We're still here. But peace, I learned, isn't permanent. It's rented by the day. One evening, as I was locking up after the guests had gone to bed, I noticed something strange. Footprints, fresh, large, leading from the dock to the tree line. I followed them, flashlight in hand, the beam trembling across the wet earth. The prints ended by the fence near the path to the road. In the mud, half buried, was an envelope. My name again, written in familiar handwriting. Inside was a single page, folded once. Mom, if you're reading this, it means I made it out. I never meant for it to go that far. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know I didn't fall. I jumped. I had to disappear before they disappeared me. Don't look for me. Keep the house. You were right about everything. No signature. But the scrawl was unmistakable. For a long time, I just stood there, the note trembling in my hand, the night pressing in around me. Then I lifted my eyes to the lake. The moonlight lay across it like a path of silver. He was alive, somewhere out there, carrying the same blood, the same curse. I didn't call the police. I didn't tell Carla. Some truths don't need witnesses. They just need to be lived with. Instead, I burned the letter in the fireplace, watching the paper curl and blacken. The smoke rose up the chimney and out over the lake, carrying his words into the dark. Months passed. The retreat flourished. The women painted the walls, planted flowers, filled the rooms with stories louder than ghosts. I felt Peter's presence again, not as a memory but as a rhythm, in the laughter, the hammering, the sound of waves against the dock. One morning, I stood by the water with my coffee, the sky pale pink. Across the lake, mist drifted low, soft as breath. And for a heartbeat, I saw movement, a small boat gliding near the far shore. A single figure at the oars, head bowed. I blinked, and it was gone. Maybe it was a trick of the fog. Maybe not. Either way, I whispered into the wind, "Be better than I was." The waves lapped against the dock, almost like an answer. I turned back toward the house, my house, where the lights glowed warm against the morning. The porch smelled of coffee and paint and something else, new beginnings. For the first time in a long, long while, I smiled. Family can build a home or burn it down. Blood is not ownership. Love is not debt. And sometimes the justice that heals us isn't found in courtrooms or confessions. It's found in surviving what was meant to destroy us. I lost my son. But I found myself again, and every time the wind moves across Lake Barrow, I remember peace isn't given. It's claimed.